This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
This week's episode, you are in for a treat. Our wonderful YPJ resident midwife, Chloe, is speaking with one of our incredible YPJ members, Megan.
So if you could start with sharing a little bit about your first birth and how that kind of affected your decision to join YPJ.
I went to my midwife appointment and I was offered a suite, and I'd never had that before and I didn't know what it was. So I searched through the community, spoke to kind of people on hyper support.
You obviously felt very comfortable, comfortable mentally in the space that you were in.
Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. This week's episode, you are in for a treat. Our wonderful YPJ resident midwife, Chloe, is speaking with one of our incredible YPJ members, Megan. Megan is kindly allowing us to share the insight into her pregnancy and birth with her second little boy. After a previous traumatic birth experience, Megan is sharing the most wonderful, positive vaginal birth experience that she has had recently. Grab a cuppa and listen in. If you are an expectant mum, then recognise that this is such an important time, and I cannot emphasise it enough, to really ensure you go into your experience empowered, informed and supported, but properly. Megan fell into the trap with her first birth of thinking she was well prepared, and found out the hard way that in fact she wasn't well prepared for such a life-changing experience and massive milestone in any woman's journey. I'm delighted to be able to share with you this wonderful birth story. So thank you to Chloe and Megan for chatting it through, and I hope that you enjoy listening to it on the Midwife Pip podcast too.
So thank you for joining us, Jess and Polly. It's lovely to see you, and hopefully if anyone else joins in along the way, I'll just give them a little wave. And Megan, thank you for sharing your birth story with us. I'm really, really excited for you to share this one, because I know that you had very different experiences, didn't you, first and second time around. So if you could start with sharing a little bit about your first birth and how that kind of affected your sort of decision to join YPJ.
So I think I should preface by saying that my first birth wasn't a bad birth. It was a traumatic experience for me, but it wasn't a bad birth. Yeah. But I think because I was so uninformed and not very empowered, everything that happened in my first birth was it just felt horrible. And I just felt like it was out of my control. And I didn't look after myself after birth either. It was just post-COVID. So the experience we had in the recovery and sort of postnatal ward was just not very good either. It was massively understaffed. So I think the overall experience was not great. But my first birth with Logan was in November 2021. So it was cold, it was snowy. And I remember kind of in the build up to it, I hadn't really done much birth prep at all. I didn't really know what a contraction would feel like, and I didn't have any kind of symptoms going into it around, a show or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then what happened is I had severe back pain, and I know that I've got issues with my back anyway, but I was like, it was chronic. It was really, really bad back pain, like to the point that I couldn't stand up. And I didn't think that was any kind of sign of labor, but apparently, as it turns out afterwards, you can have something called back labor.
Yeah.
Which is where you can't feel typical contractions, because everything is radiating in your back basically, and it's positional, which I didn't know either. So if the baby is in a position that's not ideal, like back to back and things like that, it just can change the whole experience for you. So I just had really, really bad back pain. Didn't know I was really in labor. Tried to go to the hospital. They told me that if I'm not having contractions or whatever, that I shouldn't go in. So there was a bit of a fight with them to get myself into hospital. When I got there, it was swarmed. It was so busy. I was in the waiting room. There were no beds available, and my waters broke in the waiting room, sitting on a chair.
Oh.
So again, and I just didn't, because I was so ill-informed, I just panicked, didn't know what was going on, didn't know what to do, my anxiety levels. And if you've done any of Pip's course, she talks about the kind of different types of stress and the different hormones that you feel when you're kind of going into labor, and how you can have sort of almost like good stress and bad stress. And my anxiety was on the bad side.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really have a birth preference thing written down or anything like that. So I was taken off to a room, and I couldn't really move. They wanted me. I was only 1 or 2 centimeters dilated, and I was only, in their eyes, I wasn't ready, and they wanted to send me home, even though my waters had broken. And my other half had to fight. I couldn't get in a car. I couldn't drive anywhere, but they were trying to get me to go home, because obviously they just didn't have space. So it was just a big fight with them to stay there. And I ended up having a really long labor. I had meconium in my waters, so I had to be on monitoring. I was pretty out of it. I couldn't tell you my birth story, actually, in detail, because I was on so many drugs, so gone, just don't really remember it. And I think it was 18 hours in the end.
Yeah.
And I was on monitoring the whole time. I'd had an epidural, but it hadn't been very effective because I was lying on my side. So only one side of my body was numb and the other side wasn't.
Oh, okay.
And then I couldn't lie on my back because his heart rate, or Logan's heart rate, would fluctuate. So I had to keep being on my side, and turning over was just an effort. I had to have loads of doctors come in to help turn me over. And it was just, I wasn't making any decisions myself. And I think eventually they said that they had to expedite him coming out. I think I only pushed for a couple of minutes, and then they just said his heart rate was going nuts. So the doctor came in and did a Ventouse. Mm-hmm. I had a episiotomy and a Ventouse, and then he was out pretty quickly. He was fine. I was fine. Went home. Wasn't a great first couple of days. My stitches got infected because I didn't look after them, and so I was on antibiotics. And it was just, the whole thing was just not a great experience for me. So when I'd been following Pip all the way through anyway, but just hadn't really been paying much attention to the content. Yeah. And then I think when I got pregnant with Logan, or with Brody, I then kind of didn't know what to do. I said, I'm not going to do an NCT course, because I didn't find that very helpful the first time round. And I said, I kind of just need to have someone help me with working through my decision process. Mm. And so I had a chat with Pip, and actually just went through all the stuff that happened in my first birth. And I just said, what is YPJ all about? And she kind of talked to me about, what all of the information that she would give, and the support that you get and everything else. And I just thought, I just want to feel more informed and understand all the different things that that go into birth. And actually, I said, I don't want to have the same thing happen again. But equally, I'm so scared that I wanted to opt for a planned C-section.
Yeah.
Because it's what I wanted. It's more because I just didn't want to go through all that stuff again. So it was really kind of making decisions out of fear.
Yeah.
So when I joined YPJ, Pip said, we really need to get to a point where you're making decisions based on knowledge and understanding and your own kind of comfort that that's what you want to do.
My brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book, this is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve.
And so I joined YPJ and kind of went through all the course content, spoke regularly on hypercare about things that were happening in my pregnancy, and got loads of support around kind of the growth scans and what to be concerned about and not to be concerned about. And I spoke to a consultant at my hospital about planned C-section, and the consultant was basically giving me the A to Z of why it's so dangerous and risky. And not giving me pros and cons of anything, just giving me all the bad stuff. And I was like, this is horrendous. So I had to work through that as well. And I was like, okay, so someone's telling me C-sections are horrendous. I've had a bad experience with a vaginal birth, and I'm just like, what am I going to do? So then I got another consultant from the same hospital, and she was just completely different, and gave me, the pros and cons. So at this point, I'm like, well, I think I could go for a C-section then, it sounds okay. But the more I worked through the course content, the more I attended all the live calls, listened to other birth stories, the more I kind of started to understand what it could be like if you're making decisions yourself. And I also thought about C-sections having a toddler, because Logan is 2 years and 10 months, so he's quite a handful.
Yeah,
he's very, very rambunctious. And I just thought to myself, I don't know if I can actually have a C-section and be recovering for 6 weeks. So I don't think that is necessarily the right decision for me. And so I was just working through everything, but everything was because I had the knowledge and information in front of me, and I wasn't just kind of going, I want a C-section, I want a C-section, I want a C-section. And yeah, I think I made the decision in the last, I think I made the decision probably in the last sort of 3 weeks that I wasn't going to go for a C-section. It was quite last minute.
Yeah.
And sorry.
So no, don't you worry about it.
So I just decided I wasn't going to go for the C-section in the end, and then I just got my mindset right. I'm gonna try and go for the vaginal birth, and if I have to have a C-section, at least I have all the information and knowledge to do that as well.
Yeah.
And then I think I was coming up. Where was I? Coming up to my due date, and I hadn't had any kind of signs of early labor or anything like that. With Logan, with Logan, we went into spontaneous labor 2 days before my due date. Not that I knew it was labor with all the back pain.
Yeah.
And with Brody, we were at 39 plus 6, I think. And I was off. I went to my midwife appointment, and I was offered a sweep. And I'd never had that before, and I didn't know what it was. So I searched through the community, spoke to kind of people on hyper support, said, what's the sweep all about? Read everyone's experiences. I think Jess shared her experiences and a few others. And I decided actually that was something I probably would try and do. just to see if it kind of had any effect, and it would obviously let me know what the situation was down under and how ready my body was. So I went for that the day before. Wasn't too bad. Not the most pleasant experience in the world, but it did, no harm done basically. So I had that, and then on my that night I didn't have any symptoms or anything like that, but I couldn't sleep. So I was up at about 4 a.m. And normally that's the time of day that Brody would be moving a lot.
Yeah.
So I was like, why can't I feel him moving? And I was like, this is weird. I couldn't feel him move. And I don't know if it was just my head playing tricks on me, but I honestly couldn't feel anything. So I was panicking. And I was supposed to go for a growth scan the next day anyway, because, the tape measure, midwife measuring, always comes up small if you're tall. But yeah, so I called the hospital in the morning at first thing, and I just said, look, I'm supposed to come in for a growth scan anyway, but I'm really concerned because I haven't felt baby move for a few hours. So this was on my due date, and I went in the morning straight to the hospital, and they put me on monitoring to get the heart to see if everything was okay. And of course, within 2 minutes, there was kicking and movement. So I don't know if I just was panicking or if I just actually didn't feel anything. I don't know. But yeah, the baby was absolutely fine. I was on monitoring for a few.
Right thing, like you say, following his pattern, and who knows what was going on, but it was so important at that stage. And also, again, a really important message in that, because you were going in the next day, some people would be a bit like, oh, I'm going in, and I'll wait.
Just wait for it, yeah.
And obviously you did exactly what we would want you to do, get in there and get things checked.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I just, I wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Just because you never know when you're so close. You've worked 9 months for this baby. You don't want anything to go wrong at the last minute. So I was in there, everything was fine, and then I had to wait around for my growth scan anyway. Oh, Bubba, let me just take you out this. I think you're a bit hot. He's a little bit congested this morning from the reflux, I think.
Yeah.
Eating a little bit more than he should be, but if it makes him feel better, then I'm just going to pop him on.
Go for it. I'm looking at Hallie, a little like squirming away in her chair as well. Stay there.
1 minute, little man.
Already different experiences from what you said.
So everything was fine. I went for my growth scan. Of course, growth scan was okay, but they wanted me to speak to a consultant or a doctor because I'd gone in for low movements. So about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw the doctor, and he said, look, because you've come in on your due date with low movement or no movement concerns, we would suggest you have an induction. And so I was
you have to navigate then.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, well, I hadn't even considered it. Like, why would they offer me that? But that is apparently standard practice if you've gone in really close to your due date or on your due date with concerns around movement. So I didn't know that. So he said, yeah, we would offer an induction. And I said, okay, well, what's your recommendation? He said, well, we recommend you get induced. And so my head was in a bit of a spin at this point, and I asked just for a few minutes to chat to my mum and consider it, etc. Spoke to my other half. I messaged on hyper support just to kind of work that through as well, and ultimately it's induction is recommended for good reasons, but because I'd gone into spontaneous labor before, I thought my body is probably my body knows what to do. So I thought I would give it, if this was Friday, so I thought I'll give it the rest of the day. And then I was booked in for, I think, induction the following week anyway. So I would have just called them up if nothing had happened and if I was concerned. So I went home, picked up my little one from nursery. This was like 2 p.m. And then had a little friend of his round, and they were playing in the house. And I started to feel a bit of pain, like cramps, period pain. And this was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would feel these sort of period cramps happening every half hour-ish. And it was just like, oh, that's a bit uncomfortable. And my toddler's friend's mother was like, are you all right? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Fine.
You always don't want to jinx it and in fear it will go away and nothing will happen.
Well, yeah, and I thought, because I hadn't had contractions last time, I didn't really know what they would feel like and how bad they'd be. So in my eyes, it was bearable and it was just a little bit uncomfortable. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm in early labour. And then she kind of left just about 4 o'clock. And then I messaged my mum and said, I think you might need to come over because I think I'm in early labour. And then 4:30 comes along and they were getting a little bit more intense. And I said to my other half, I think you need to finish work now because I needed to take Logan. And so he came downstairs and he was like, is your mum on her way? And I was like, I don't know. So I phoned my mum. She's like, oh, I was going to go get some petrol. Da, 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 da. I was like, Mum, you need to get here now.
How far away is your mum?
She's about 20 minutes drive away.
She was just like, I've got a few things to do.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously clearly didn't make it clear, that she needed to be there then. But so she got there about 5:30, then we headed off to the hospital. And I phoned the hospital and I said, I think I'm in labour, and I had contractions whilst I was on the call. So I had to work through that. And then we got to the hospital and the parking situation's dire. So I just told my other half to drop me off at A&E so I could walk up to the labour ward. And I would have to kind of stop on the way in through the contractions, and all sorts of people looking at you because you're obviously just hugging onto the wall, like breathe, breathe, breathe. And I made my way up to the labour ward, and thankfully this time there was no one in the waiting room. It was quite quiet. Yeah. Someone was waiting for me, obviously, because I called up front, so they were expecting me. And they took me into triage, and she saw that I think I was 4 centimeters dilated.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so she said, we're just going to get a room ready for you. And then went into the room. And
how were you feeling at that point when she said, so you are in active labour? Because you sound like at this point you're still quite chilled. Like
I was. I mean, I just didn't expect it because my other one was so long. The contractions were intense. Like, don't get me wrong, they were quite painful, but because I'd never experienced it before, and because I kind of knew what was coming, I thought, well, this is going to go on for a few hours, so I just need to kind of deal with it. And then when she said I was 4 centimeters, again, my last one, I was 4 centimeters hours before, but because I was on the oxytocin drip, the epidural, everything else, my labor was prolonged. So I was 4 centimeters for a very long time. So in my head, 4 centimeters could have been hours away.
Yeah.
So they took me to the room, and I had such lovely midwives. One of them was, I think she was a student midwife, and you have to do 40 births or something, 40 births before you kind of are done. And we were her 40th. So that was she was quite special for her, which was quite nice. I mean, I just loved the midwife and her. They were just really, really lovely and really looked after me and kind of advocated for me, which was such a different experience to before. They asked me, exactly what I wanted. They were talking me through everything they were doing. My contractions were quite intense, so I didn't even ask for gas and air. They were like, do you want some gas and air now? And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be nice, thanks.
What about that?
Yeah, I know, I did. I was just like, yeah, no, that would be great. And I think for me, the gas and air, it doesn't relieve the pain, but it gives you something else to concentrate on, and it helps you focus on your breathing. So because you're taking deep breaths in and out with the gas and air, it just helps you with that breathing through the contractions.
Did they, just out of curiosity, did they ask any questions about your birth preferences did you take your your birth preferences notes with you?
It was in my bag, but it wasn't something that they asked about, because I wanted to use a birthing pool. But I didn't at the time, I didn't ask for it, because when she said I was 4 centimeters dilated, I didn't know if that meant I could or couldn't. And if there was a reason, and I just didn't think about it. I think because of my contractions were so intense, I was just going on what they said,
Yeah.
we were going to the room, we were going to do this, and then I was on the bed, and all I could think about was breathing through my contractions. I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'd like to be in a pool, or I'd like my TENS machine. I was just breathing through those contractions.
A quick pause here, because I want to share a super important health tip from Nutricia, the sponsor of this week's episode. The first 1,000 days of your child's life, which is the 9 months of pregnancy and up to their second birthday, provide an incredible opportunity to support their gut health, which has a profound impact on all sorts of short and long-term health outcomes. Which means, as a pregnant or new mum listener, you are in an incredible time of opportunity. So here is a top tip. Role model to your child. Infants' brains are like sponges, and they will often mirror behaviours that they see, which means if you're adopting healthy lifestyle choices, especially around nutrition and exercise, then they will also do so. Consuming a variety of foods and aiming for 30 different types of plants each week. This is much easier to do than it sounds. Fruits, vegetables, herbs, spices, ground or crushed nuts and seeds and grains all count. So adding some mixed ground seeds on your baby's breakfast may give you 5 of these points straight away. Opting for mixed mashed berries over a single type is another simple swap hack. Gut health matters for so many physical, developmental, and psychological health outcomes for our children. So here is to us helping them on their way to healthier, happier futures.
Because they were quite intense.
Which it just shows that even if it's not going exactly to sort of to plan, what your mindset in that moment still sounds like you were kind of just really focused, very comfortable with the environment that you'd been put in. So there wasn't, maybe your brain wasn't thinking, how can I make this how I need it to be? You obviously felt very comfortable, comfortable mentally in the space that you were in, and focusing on exactly what you were doing. So it shows that kind of when the plan is, changing slightly, or it might be that what you think you need actually, that flexibility there, that you didn't actually need that in that moment. Because I think otherwise your brain would have been like, oh, I need to get the pool ready. I need to, you're obviously just very focused and, getting on with what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think had I gone in and she was like, oh, okay, you're 1 or 2 centimeters, and things are not progressed as far yet, then I think the conversation would have been different, and I think I probably would have gone through, okay, well, is there a pool available, and let's get out the TENS machines and stuff like that. But yeah, I just was just working through the contractions and breathing and doing what needed to be done there, and chatting to the midwives, and I felt comfortable. I didn't feel like I was missing anything.
Yeah, good.
And I didn't have any other form of pain relief at this point. I was on the bed, and I was in a position that I was basically sat really, really upright.
Yeah.
And my legs were kind of pushing into the bed, and that was okay. But I did say, I'm not comfortable, I need to move. And so she said, okay, well, what position do you want to be in? And I said, I want to be leaning over the bed. Yeah. So I then kind of turned around and leant over the bed, so I was more comfortable. And then the problem with that position was that they couldn't monitor baby at that point. So I did have the monitoring bands on, and they couldn't monitor baby, and they weren't comfortable that they couldn't monitor him.
Were you at the birth centre at this point, or had you gone to delivery suite?
I was in
the labour ward.
In the labour ward, yeah. I was just in a delivery in a room, yeah. Um, I think our labour ward it's at Frimley Park Hospital, so I think they're together, the birthing centre, and they're next to each other.
Yeah.
But yes, I was in
They just
the
out of interest, did they sort of explain why they were monitoring you continuously at that point, or was it just a case of, again, going with the flow? You just had the monitoring on, you were happy with that?
Yeah, they did ask. They did ask before they put the monitoring on if they could, and I said yes. So I was okay with that because I think I'd had the experience with Logan, with his heart rate fluctuating so much. I was comfortable with them monitoring that, and it was something I was open to anyway.
Yeah, and you obviously had some concerns literally the day before as well, so probably was quite reassuring for you to be monitored.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so when I was in that position and they said they couldn't monitor him, then they asked if I would go onto my side, and I said no. I said that's triggering. I said I was on my side for my last one, and I'm absolutely not going on my side. Okay. And so then they said, okay, well, which position can you be in? Kind of not facing the bed. So then we kind of worked through a few different positions where I was able to be comfortable and wasn't triggered, basically.
Good.
And then, yeah, I don't think it was much later than that. I was in so much pain at this point. I kind of said, right, I want an epidural. And they said, okay, are you sure you want an epidural? I said, yes, I want an epidural. And then they said, okay, we're going to contact the anaesthetist, and I'll come back and let you know. So they came back pretty quickly, and she said, they're the anaesthetist in theatre at the moment, but we have let them know that you want an epidural. So if baby isn't coming now, then we'll do the epidural. But I think at that point they knew.
They probably knew
baby was coming. Yeah, I mean, I was in there at 6 o'clock, and Brody was out by 7:30.
Wow.
So I didn't do much pushing. I was basically working through my contractions, but the intensity of the contractions was forcing me to push. And the midwives were kind of really helping me do that. And they were saying, work with it. They could see I was pushing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, it was, I could feel that because I didn't have an epidural or anything, I could actually feel everything, and I could feel the pushing. I could feel Brody was coming.
Yeah.
And my other half told me afterwards that actually because he was coming so fast, they had to control it, and they actually had to push his head back in a few times, I think, just so that he didn't come out too quickly. Yeah, so it wasn't long at all with the really intense contractions and pushing. It wasn't long, and yeah, he was out.
Wow.
And it was just such a rush being able to feel that, because obviously I didn't with Logan. I had the epidural, and I was told with the Von 2s, the way that they did it was really bizarre. The guy was brilliant, but he made me cough. So I had to cough like 5 times with the Von 2s to get the head out, and then the limbs. It was very weird. But I didn't feel that, but I felt Brody being born, which was quite nice.
I bet you felt
there's a massive sense of relief.
Absolute buzz, afterwards.
Yeah, like complete elation. I was just like, I did it. I can't believe I just did that. It was mad. And yeah, so he came out, and then they very promptly put him on my chest. They did ask first. They said, did you want skin to skin? I said yes, and so they put him on my chest. And then they did the delayed cord clamping, which is just standard practice at my hospital. And they didn't take him away for any checks or anything at all, which was really good. I didn't even have to ask. And then they told me what they were doing. So they said, obviously, they've got to get the placenta out. They asked if I wanted to birth it or if I wanted to have the injection. So I did that, had the injection, and the placenta came out. And then they asked if I wanted him to have vitamin K and how I wanted it administered. And I asked for injection as well for him, which they did while he was on me. And they helped me with putting him on my boob as well. So the midwife did all that, and so he was on me feeding and everything, and I just wasn't even watching what was going on. But that's at the point at which they once he'd had a bit of a feed and stuff, they were then asking me if they could do the stitches because I had a tear, which I
Yeah.
didn't know. Um, and so yeah, so then they said you might want some gas in there while we're doing the stitches and things, which I did need.
Yeah.
Because that was, I think they put something there to numb it, but
Yeah.
I
So
still
they
felt
do
it. So
with suturing, just so everyone's aware, they will use a local anaesthetic, which is exactly the same as what your dentist would give you if you were having a tooth extracted or, a filling or something like that. And generally the gas and air is needed for the injection, and then it's really varies. So for some people, they continue to use the gas and air. And one thing I will say is that your midwife or whoever's doing your suturing, if you're really uncomfortable, I always say, let me know, tell me, because I can give you some more. Generally, there will be more of the local anaesthetic available to give if a woman requests it. So it's just important to bear that in mind as well, that you can say that I'm actually quite uncomfortable. Can I have some more of the local anaesthetic?
I did ask for more as well.
Yeah, which is really great, because obviously we don't want you to be super uncomfortable in that stage, but often the adrenaline of birth has kind of worn off a little bit. In some cases, it might be that you're kind of waiting a little while. If, like in your case, Megan, you had the student midwife there with the midwife, and I imagine if she was at the end of her training, she was doing your suturing, but under observation with the midwife, so they would be kind of taking their time with that as well, potentially. So those things are just important to bear in mind, that you can ask if you're uncomfortable. We don't want people to be sort of super worried about having being sort of sutured after birth, and I know for a lot of people it can be something that they can be quite anxious about, so it's just important to bear that in mind as well. And based on what you were saying as well about so the questions that they were asking you, it's really good for people to know that if they are feeling anxious about being asked lots of questions and having to think about other things, that all of the things that you've mentioned, like what kind of third stage you wanted with your placenta, vitamin K, feeding options, those are all things that you did have written down in your birth plan, and that obviously you didn't have that out, and that was absolutely fine, and you were happy to go through those things with the midwives. And also I think it's still important for them to sort of be mindful of whether you do or don't want to have those conversations. But for people that are kind of a bit anxious about going through all of those things again, that you've got it written down and you have got that available, so they may not need to go through all of those things with you if you didn't want to. So that's just important to bear in mind as well. But it sounds like there was a few times where you had to advocate for yourself and make some tricky decisions from pre-labor in terms of the induction that was offered to you, and also during, as well, in terms of like positions that you're in and things like that. So it sounds like in that sense you had a very, very different experience, as well as the obvious type of birth, and build up to labor was very different, but you sounded like a different person in those two scenarios.
Yeah, 100%, like night and day. And that's why I'm so I'd recommend YPJ to anyone for that reason, and why I kind of said to Pip, please use my story, put it out there, because I really did worry about having a second at all, because the experience was so bad the first time around, and I just really couldn't see it being any better unless it was completely different. But yeah, the fact that I could make decisions, that I was aware of what was going on. Yeah, it was just really, really different for me. And
you can see that you've done a full circle from putting to just say, look, I'm just going to have a section this time. I don't want to go through that experience again. Like a few weeks before, being like, actually, I can do this, and to go into the confidence that you had, which sounds like it just resulted in a much calmer, like confident, empowering experience.
And I wasn't exhausted, and me and my other half could like even laugh and joke, afterwards. And it just wasn't, there was just no stress. It was just, okay, we've done it now. This is, now we move on and go on to the next stage. So it just felt a million times better. And most of that is because I was informed and I knew what was coming. I knew what to expect. Had I had the epidural, I think that would have been different as well. Not in a bad way, but it would have just created slightly different experience and different questions.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I just think to be able to advocate for yourself for what you want and what you don't want is really, really important. And having it written down, as you said, if I was slightly out of it for whatever reason, I would want my other half to be able to just pull that information out and to be able to answer those questions on my behalf.
Yeah,
I was able to answer those questions this time, which is good. But
absolutely. Yeah. And so lovely.
I knew how to look after myself afterwards, so I didn't get infected stitches, which I can tell you in the weeks after makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely. And yeah, it just sounds like even from the fact that there's bits of your first birth that you just can't even really remember because you just were, that must be so lovely for you to be able to like reflect on this experience in such a positive light and remember it all.
I mean, to be in pain like that, to the point that you say, oh yeah, I want to have an epidural, I'm in so much pain, but actually think of it like, that's great. That's really positive. I don't mind it. I would take that again in a heartbeat.
It's amazing, isn't it, what our brain does in terms of taking something so uncomfortable and processing it in such a positive way.
Yeah.
Like you can say on one hand that it was like painful, uncomfortable, but then you're smiling while you say it and you're like looking back with fondness, and it's just amazing, isn't it?
It's pain. I would do it again.
Absolutely. Are we thinking maybe we will do it again?
Hell no, we are two and done. No more.
We'll do it again, but I'm not going to.
I would go through it again, but yeah, no, two is a handful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just such a lovely, lovely story, and I love hearing it. I love the two completely contrasted experiences, and I would just ask really finally, like, any tips for our pregnant community in terms of like that turnaround and making sure that you have that positive experience.
Yeah, I think obviously because you're part of YPJ, make use of the hypercare and the community. So I mean, when it came to things like the sweep, I roughly knew what it was, but not well. And I just asked the community what their experiences were and used that to kind of help me decide whether I wanted to go through it or not. So leaning on the community for those types of things. And I guess making sure that your partner knows what you do and what you don't want.
Yeah.
So that if you can't say those things, that they can do it for you, because he was fully aware of what I wanted. And he actually said to me, oh, they didn't offer you the birthing pool. So, he was like, why was that? Yeah. And the first one, he couldn't have been less interested if he tried. So yeah, I think having your partner kind of know what you want, what you don't want is really important as well. And if they're doing something or saying to you something that doesn't make you comfortable or you don't want to do, then just work through it with them, understand why they want you to do it. So for me, changing position, they told me why they wanted me to change position. They told me what position they wanted me in. I said no. Yeah. And so we found a difference.
Yeah, there was a confidence there. And you had that understanding of like, they're not just trying to get me to do something I don't want to do for no reason. There is a reason behind it. How can I make it work? Yeah, exactly. That's really, really special. Yeah. Amazing. I'm just so happy for you that it's such a turnaround. And I know you haven't had the smoothest postnatal journey, but I can see at the moment that you're sort of working through some different options, aren't you? Which is really great, and you seem really positive and focused.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If you've had a positive experience and you feel supported, even things that are hard and challenging don't seem too bad. Yeah, like you can work through it as long as you feel like you've got that support and you feel like you know what you're up against. So Yeah, all good.
Absolutely. Oh, it's just so lovely to speak to you, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, Megan. I think
My
it's
pleasure.
a really, really lovely one for the community to hear. I know there will be so many of our ladies that get a lot out of it as well. And just, yeah, hearing that different contrast. Did anyone have any questions or any comments? If not, then don't worry at all. Put people under pressure to chat.
Yeah, and I'm happy to go through anything individually as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone that has a look at the video later and has any questions, just obviously pop a comment for Megan to get back to you. But thank you very much for joining us, all of you lovely ladies. And it's lovely to see all your faces. And thank you again, Megan and Brody, for being such a good boy. And Jess says thank you very, very much. I can see in her comments. So we will see you again, guys, in a couple of weeks. We've got someone lined up for our next birth story in 2 weeks' time, which works well with our R&R week, which is next week. So yeah, we will share another lovely story with you all again. And a thank you from Polly as well. Thanks, Polly. All right, lovelies. Have a great day. Lovely to see you all. And we will speak to you soon. Thank you, guys.
If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.